The stars above the Grand Canyon were sharper than any blade, cutting through the velvet night with a clarity that made my chest ache. I stood on the edge of the overlook, the camper van's faint hum behind me, and wondered how I'd ended up here. Miles from home, heart pounding, with my best friend's secret burning a hole in my soul. By morning, everything I thought I knew about myself would be gone. My name is Lucas Grant, and I'm no stranger to running. Not from danger, but from the truth. Growing up in a small Nebraska town where everyone knew your business, I learned early to keep my head down. Be the good son, the reliable friend, the guy who never rocked the boat. That was me. 6 feet of broad shoulders, calloused hand from working summers at my dad's auto shop, and a smile that hid everything I couldn't say. But out here, in the vastness of Arizona's wild heart, there was no hiding. Not from him. Not from myself. Eli Carter was the opposite of me in every way. Where I was cautious, he was reckless. Where I planned, he leapt. His sandy blonde hair caught the sun like it was made for it, and his laugh could pull you out of the darkest places. We've been inseparable since high school, 2 misfits who found each other in a sea of cornfields and conformity. He was the photographer, always chasing the perfect shot, while I was just along for the ride, or so I told myself. This trip, a week-long escape to the Grand Canyon, was his idea. "We need to see something bigger than us, Luke," he'd said, his green eyes glinting with that infectious spark. I didn't argue. I never could with him. The camper van was our home for the week, a beat-up rental with peeling paint and a temperamental engine. Inside, it smelled of coffee and Eli's cedarwood cologne. We'd spent the day hiking, his camera clicking endlessly, capturing the canyon's jagged beauty, and more often than I liked me. "You're photogenic, man," he'd tease, grinning as I ducked away. But tonight, something was off. He was quieter, his jokes fewer, his gaze lingering too long. I felt it in the air, heavy like the desert heat, as we sat by the campfire. "Luke," he said, his voice low, almost swallowed by the crackle of the flames. He was sitting cross-legged, his camera resting on his knee, staring into the fire like it held answers. "You ever think about what you're afraid to want?" I froze, my beer halfway to my lips. The question hit like a punch, too raw, too close. I laughed it off to sound brittle. "What's that supposed to mean? You going all philosopher on me now?" He didn't smile. Instead, he looked at me, his eyes catching the firelight, and I saw something there I couldn't name, something that made my pulse race and my excuses falter. "I'm serious," he said. "There's stuff we don't say, stuff we bury. Don't you ever get tired of it?" I wanted to brush it off, to change the subject like I always did when things got too real. But the canyon stretched out before us, endless and unyielding, and it felt like it was daring me to be honest for once. I took a long sip of my beer, stalling. "Maybe," I admitted finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "But some things they're better left buried." Eli shook his head, a ghost of a smile tugging at his lips. "Not out here, man. This place, it strips you down. No lies, no hiding, just you and the truth." I didn't know what to say to that. The fire popped, sending sparks into the night, and I felt the weight of his words settle into me. He was right, and that scared me more than anything. Because the truth, the one I'd been running from since I was 16, since I first noticed the way my heart raced when Eli laughed or slung an arm around my shoulders, was too big, too dangerous. I wasn't ready to face it. Not yet. We sat in silence for a while, the canyon's vastness swallowing our words. Eli fiddled with his camera, his fingers restless, and I watched him out of the corner of my eye. He was beautiful in a way I'd never let myself admit, not even in the quiet of my own mind. The way his jaw tightened when he was deep in thought, the way his hands moved with purpose, like they could shape the world into something better. I wondered what he saw when he looked at me. Did he see the guy who fixed cars and played it safe? Or did he see the mess underneath, the one who was terrified of what he felt? "Get some sleep," Eli said finally, standing and brushing the dust off his jeans. "Big day tomorrow. I want to catch the sunrise." He headed for the camper, leaving me alone with the fire in my thoughts. I stayed out there longer than I should have, staring at the stars, trying to convince myself I could keep running. But deep down, I knew the truth was catching up. Inside the camper, Eli was already sprawled on his bunk, one arm thrown over his eyes. The space was cramped, barely enough room for two grown guys and their gear, but it felt like home. I climbed into my bunk across from him, the creak of the mattress loud in the quiet. I lay there, listening to his steady breathing, and tried to ignore the way my heart wouldn't slow down. Sleep didn't come easy that night. I didn't know it yet, but everything was about to change. The sunrise over the Grand Canyon was a firestorm of color, painting the cliffs in hues of gold and crimson. Eli was up before dawn, his camera already in hand, his silhouette sharp against the glowing horizon. I watched him from the camper's doorway, coffee mug warm in my hands, and felt that familiar pull in my chest, half awe, half dread. He turned, catching my eye, and grinned. "You gonna stand there all day? Or, you coming to see this?" His voice was light, but there was an edge to it, like he was testing me. I forced a smile and joined him, the cold morning air biting at my skin. The canyon stretched out below us, vast and indifferent, and I wondered if it could swallow the secrets I was carrying. We hiked down a narrow trail, Eli leading the way with that effortless confidence I envied. He stopped every few steps to snap photos, his focus intense, like the world only existed through his lens. "This place is unreal," he said, crouching to capture a jagged rock formation. "Makes you feel small, doesn't it?" "Yeah," I muttered, my eyes on him instead of the view. He was right, but it wasn't the canyon making me feel small. It was him, his fearlessness, his ability to live so openly while I was stuck hiding behind walls I'd built myself. We reach a lookout point by mid-morning, the sun high and relentless. Eli set up his tripod, muttering about light and angles, while I sat on a flat rock, pretending to study the map. Really, I was watching him. The way his shirt clung to his shoulders, the way his brow furrowed in concentration. I told myself it was just admiration, just friendship, but the lie was getting harder to hold on to. "Luke," he said suddenly, not looking up from his camera, "why don't you ever talk about what you want? Like, really want?" The question caught me off guard like a stone dropped into still water. I shifted, my boots scuffing the dirt. "I don't know," I said, aiming for casual. "Guess I don't think about it much." He snorted, finally looking at me. "Bullshit. You think more than anyone I know. You're just scared to say it." My throat tightened. He wasn't wrong, but hearing it out loud made my skin prickle. "What about you?" I shot back, deflecting. "You're always chasing something, photos, adventures, whatever. What are you running from?" For a moment, he didn't answer. He adjusted his camera, his movements slow, deliberate. Then he said, "I'm not running. I'm trying to find something real." The words hung between us, heavy and raw. I wanted to ask what he meant, but fear clamped my mouth shut. Instead, I stood brushing off my jeans. "We should keep moving. Trail's not going to hike itself." Eli nodded, but his eyes lingered on me, searching. We packed up and kept going, the silence between us thicker than before. The day passed in a blur of dust and sunlight, but the tension didn't fade. By evening, we were back at the camper, exhausted but restless. Eli cooked dinner, burnt hot dogs and canned beans, while I fiddled with the radio, trying to fill the quiet. After we ate, he pulled out his laptop to review his photos. I sat across from him, pretending to read a guidebook, but my eyes kept drifting to the screen. Image after image of the canyon, each one breathtaking, but it was the ones of me that stopped my breath. Me laughing by the fire, me staring out at the horizon, me looking at him when I thought he wasn't watching. There was something in those photos, something I couldn't ignore, a truth captured in pixels and light. "These are good," I said, my voice rough. "You're really good." He glanced at me, his smile soft but guarded. "Thanks, but it's not just about the shot. It's about what's in it." I didn't know how to respond. The camper felt smaller, the air thicker. I stood, muttering something about needing air, and stepped outside. The night was cool, the stars blazing again, and I leaned against the camper, trying to steady my racing heart. Eli followed me out a minute later, his hands in his pockets. "You okay?" he asked, his voice gentle but probing. "Yeah, elite. Just a lot to take in." He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne again. "Luke, you don't have to keep it all in. Not with me." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the same vulnerability I'd seen in his eyes the night before. It terrified me, but it also pulled me in like the canyon itself. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I turned away, my hands clenched into fists. "I'm fine," I said, the lie tasting bitter. "Let's just get some sleep." He didn't push, but I felt his gaze on my back as I climbed into the camper. That night, I lay awake again, staring at the ceiling, the weight of his words and those photos pressing down on me. I didn't know how much longer I could keep running from the truth. Not when it was sleeping just a few feet away. The next morning, the canyon was shrouded in mist, the cliff's ghostly shapes in the pale light. Eli was already outside, his camera aimed at the haze, capturing the surreal beauty. I watched him through the camper's window, my coffee gone cold, and wondered how he could be so steady when everything inside me was unraveling. We didn't talk much as we packed up for another hike. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, but it was charged like the air before a storm. I kept replaying his word from the night before. "You don't have to keep it all in." What did he know? What did he see in me that I was too afraid to face? The trail we chose was steeper, more isolated, winding through narrow slots in the rock. Eli led the way, his steps sure, while I followed, my thoughts a tangle. Halfway down, he stopped at a ledge overlooking a sheer drop, the canyon sprawling below, like a painting too big for its frame. He set up his camera, but instead of shooting, he turned to me. "Luke," he said, his voice steady but soft, "I need to tell you something." My stomach twisted. I knew that tone, the one he used when he was about to say something that couldn't be undone. I wanted to stop him, to keep things safe, but my voice caught in my throat. He took a deep breath, his eyes locking onto mine. "I've been in love with you for years," he said, the words tumbling out like they'd been trapped too long. I didn't know how to say it, or if I should, but I can't keep pretending it's not there. Not out here. The world tilted. My breath stopped, my heart pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it. I stared at him, his face open and raw, and felt the walls I'd built start to crack. "Eli," I started, but I didn't know what to say. "Love." The word was too big, too real, and it carried everything I'd been running from. "I know you're scared," he went on, stepping closer. "I know you've got a million reasons to push this away. But I see you, Luke. I see the way you look at me when you think I'm not watching. I see the way you hold back. And I'm done pretending I don't feel it too." I shook my head, my hands trembling. "You don't know what you're asking," I said, my voice breaking. It's not that simple. Back home, people, they'll tear us apart. Let them," he said fiercely. "This isn't about them. It's about us. About you being honest with yourself for once." I turned away, staring out at the canyon, its vastness mocking my smallness. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that I didn't feel the same, but the lie wouldn't form. Because I did feel it. I'd felt it for years, buried so deep I could pretend it wasn't there. But out here, with nowhere to hide, it was clawing its way to the surface. "I can't," I whispered, more to myself than to him. I'm not like you." Eli's face softened, but there was pain in his eyes. "You don't have to be like me. You just have to be you." He didn't push further, just picked up his camera and started shooting again, like he hadn't just turned my world upside down. We hiked on, the silence heavier now, every step a reminder of what he'd said. I kept my distance, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to run back to the camper, to drive away and pretend this never happened. But another part, the part that had always been drawn to Eli, wanted to stay to see where this could go. That night, back at the camper, the tension was unbearable. Eli was quiet, giving me space, but his presence filled the small space. I couldn't look at him without seeing his confession, without feeling the pull of what he was offering. After dinner, he stepped outside to clean the dishes, and I sat at the tiny table, staring at my hands. I thought about home, about my dad's stern face, the whispers in our small town, the expectations that had shaped me into someone I barely recognized. Then I thought about Eli, his laugh, his courage, the way he saw the world in colors I couldn't name. And I realized something. The life I'd been living, the one where I hid who I was, wasn't a life at all. It was a cage. When Eli came back inside, I was standing, my heart in my throat. Eli, I said, my voice shaking. I don't know how to do this, but I don't want to lose you. He froze, his eyes searching mine. Then, slowly, he crossed the small space between us and took my hand. His touch was warm, steady, and for the first time in years, I didn't pull away. Eli's hand in mine felt like a lifeline, grounding me even as my heart raced. The camper's dim light cast shadows across his face, highlighting the hope and fear in his eyes. I wanted to say something to bridge the gap between us, but words felt too small for what was happening. You don't have to have all the answers, he said softly, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. Just don't run from this. Not yet. I nodded, my throat tight. I wasn't ready to name what I felt, but I couldn't deny it anymore. Not when he was standing there, offering me something I'd spent years convincing myself I didn't deserve. The next day, we hiked deeper into the canyon, the trail winding through narrow passages where the walls seemed to whisper secrets. Eli was quieter than usual, giving me space to process, but his presence was a constant reminder of his confession. I caught myself watching him, how he moved with purpose, how his eyes lit up when he found the perfect shot. Every moment felt charged, like we were balancing on the edge of something bigger than either of us. By afternoon, we reached a hidden alcove, a pocket of shade where the air was cool and the world felt far away. Eli set down his camera and sat on a smooth boulder, patting the space beside him. I hesitated, then joined him, our shoulders brushing. The contact sent a jolt through me, and I wondered if he felt it too. Tell me something true, he said, his voice low. Something you've never told anyone. I stared at the ground, my heart pounding. The truth was a dangerous thing, but out here, with the canyon's walls closing us in, it felt like the only thing that mattered. When I was 17, I started, my voice barely audible. I kissed a guy at a party. It was quick, in the dark, and I ran out before anyone saw. I told myself it didn't mean anything, but I've never stopped thinking about it. Eli's breath caught, but he didn't speak. He just waited, giving me room to keep going. So I did. I was scared of what it meant, of what people would say. So I buried it, pushed it down so deep I could pretend it wasn't there. But it's always been there, Eli. And then you make it impossible to ignore. He turned to me, his eyes soft but intense. You're not alone in this, Luke. You never were. I wanted to believe him, but fear was a stubborn thing. What happens when we go back? I asked. This place, it's like a bubble. But out there, in the real world. We'll figure it out, he said, his voice firm. Together. The word together settled into me, warm and heavy. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, I let myself imagine what it could be like. To stop hiding, to let myself want him. The thought was terrifying, but it was also freeing, like a weight lifting off my chest. That night, back at the camper, we sat closer than usual, our knees touching as we shared a beer. The air was thick with unspoken questions, but for once, I didn't feel the need to run. When Eli reached for my hand again, I didn't pull away. Instead, I squeezed back, my heart racing but steady. I'm scared, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Me too, he said, his smile small but real. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you. The words hit me like a wave, washing away the last of my defenses. I leaned in, my forehead resting against his, and for a moment, the world was just us. No canyon, no past, no fear. Just two people finding their way to each other. Sleep came easier that night, but it was different. The camper felt smaller, warmer, like it was holding us together. I dreamed of open skies and Eli's laugh, and when I woke, I knew I'd never be the same. The canyon's colors shifted with each day, but nothing changed as much as I did. Waking up to Eli's soft snoring across the camper, I felt a clarity I hadn't known was possible. His confession, my own halting truths, they'd cracked something open inside me, and I wasn't sure I could close it again. We spent the day exploring a new trail, the air thick with the scent of sage and dust. Eli was back to his usual self, cracking jokes and snapping photos, but there was a new softness in the way he looked at me. It made my skin hum, like I was alive in a way I hadn't been before. I caught myself smiling more, laughing at his terrible puns, and when our hands brushed as we passed the water bottle, I didn't flinch. By noon, we found a shallow stream cutting through the canyon floor, its water cold and clear. Eli kicked off his boots and waded in, grinning like a kid. "Come on, Luke, live a little." I hesitated, then followed, the icy water shocking my senses. We splashed each other, laughing until we were breathless, and for a moment, I forgot about the world waiting back home. It was just us, the canyon, and this fragile, beautiful thing growing between us. As the sun dipped lower, we sat on the stream's bank, drying off in the fading light. Eli leaned back on his hands, his shirt damp and clinging to his chest. "You ever think about what home's going to be like after this?" he asked, his tone careful. The question brought me back to reality, the weight of it settling in my gut. Home at Nebraska, where people talked and judged, where my dad's disapproval was a constant shadow. "Yeah," I said, my voice quieter. "I think about a lot." Eli sat up, his eyes searching mine. "You don't have to go back to who you were, you know. You could be this version of you, the one who's not afraid." I wanted to believe him, but the fear was still there, coiled tight. "It's not that easy," I said. "My dad, the shop, the whole town, they expect me to be someone I'm not." "Then don't be," he said, his voice fierce. "You're not just their son or their mechanic. You're you, Luke, and you're enough." His words hit hard, stirring something deep. I looked at him, the canyon stretching out behind him, and felt a surge of courage. What if I'm not ready to lose them? I asked, my voice breaking. "My family, my home." Eli reached for my hand, his grip steady. "You won't lose me, no matter what." That night, back at the camper, we didn't talk about home. Instead, we talked about everything else. Our favorite movies, the places we wanted to see, the dreams we'd never shared. It was easy, like slipping into something that had always been there. When we finally climbed into our bunks, I reached across the narrow space and took his hand, holding it until sleep pulled me under. The next morning, I woke to find Eli already up, sitting outside with his camera. I joined him, the air cool and sharp. He showed me a photo he'd taken at dawn. A lone tree clinging to a cliff, its roots exposed but unyielding. "That's you," he said, his voice soft. "Stronger than you think." I didn't know what to say, so I just sat beside him, our shoulders touching. The canyon was quiet, but it felt alive, like it was watching us, waiting to see what we'd do next. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of the answer. The days blurred together, each one peeling back another layer of who I thought I was. Eli's presence was a constant, his laughter and quiet moments weaving into the fabric of the canyon. But as our trip neared its end, the real world loomed closer, and with it, the question of what came next. We spent our penultimate day at a remote viewpoint, the canyon sprawling below like a challenge. Eli was quieter, his camera resting in his lap as he stared out at the horizon. I knew he was thinking about it too, the life waiting beyond these cliffs, the choices we'd have to make. "Luke," he said finally, his voice low, "when we leave here, what do you want this to be?" I swallowed hard, my hands tightening around the water bottle I held. "I don't know," I admitted. "I want this us, but I'm scared of what it means, of what I'll lose." He nodded, his expression unreadable. "I get it, but you can't live for what other people want. Not forever." His words stung, not because they were harsh, but because they were true. I thought about my dad, his pride in the son he thought I was, and the church we went to every Sunday, where love like this was a sin. Then I thought about Eli and the way he made me feel alive, like I could be more than the box I've been forced into. "I want to try," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "With you. I don't know how, but I want to try." Eli's face lit up, a smile breaking through the tension. He reached for my hand, and this time I didn't hesitate to take it. We sat there, hands clasped, the canyon bearing witness to something new and fragile. That night, the camper felt different. Smaller, warmer, like it was holding us closer. We didn't talk much, just sat side by side, sharing the last of our beer. When Eli leaned in, his lips brushing mine, it wasn't a shock. It was a homecoming. The kiss was soft, tentative, but it carried everything we'd been too afraid to say. I kissed him back, my hands finding his face, and for the first time I wasn't running. When we pulled apart, his eyes were bright, his breath uneven. "I wanted to do that for so long," he whispered. "Me too," I said, and it was the truest thing I'd ever said. We fell asleep tangled together, the camper's walls shielding us from the world. But even as I held him, I knew the real test was coming. The canyon had given us space to be honest, but back home, we'd have to fight for it. The final morning dawned clear, the canyon's cliffs sharp against a pale blue sky. Eli and I packed up the camper in silence, the weight of our departure heavy between us. The kiss from a night before lingered, a promise and a question, and I wasn't sure I had the answers. As we drove away from the Grand Canyon, the landscape blurring past, I felt the pull of home like a tether. Eli reached for my hand, his fingers lacing through mine, and I held on tight. "We'll be okay," he said, his voice steady. "Whatever happens, we'll figure it out." I nodded, but doubt gnawed at me. The drive back to Nebraska was long, filled with quiet moments and stolen glances. We talked about everything but the future, music, the photos Eli wanted to print, the places we'd go next. But the closer we got to home, the more the real world crept in. When we finally pulled into my driveway, the familiar sight of my dad's auto shop hit me like a punch. Eli parked the camper, and we sat there, the engine ticking as it cooled. "You ready?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. "No," I admitted, my voice raw, "but I'm not running anymore." He smiled, squeezing my hand. "That's a start." I took a deep breath and stepped out, the gravel crunching under my boots. My dad was in the garage, wiping his hands on a rag, his face breaking into a grin when he saw me. "You're back," he said, pulling me into a hug. "How was it?" I glanced at Eli, who was unloading our bags, and felt a surge of courage. "It was life-changing," I said, the words carrying more weight than he could know. That night, I sat my dad down and told him the truth. Not all of it, not yet, but enough. I told him about Eli, about how I felt, about the person I wanted to be. His face hardened, his silence heavy, but he didn't yell. He just listened, his hands folded tightly in his lap. When I finished, he stood and walked out, leaving me with the echo of my own words. It hurt, but it was a start. Eli was there, waiting outside, and when I told him what happened, he pulled me into his arms. "You did good," he whispered. "You're braver than you know." The days that followed were hard. My dad barely spoke to me, and the town's whispers grew louder. But Eli was my anchor, his presence a reminder that I wasn't alone. We started small, holding hands in private, stealing kisses when no one was watching. Each step felt like a victory, a reclaiming of the life I denied myself. The Grand Canyon had changed me, not because of its beauty, but because of what it showed me about myself. I'd spent years running from who I was, but out there, with Eli, I'd found the courage to stop, to love, to live. I never slept the same again, not because of fear, but because I was finally awake. And with Eli by my side, I knew I could face whatever came next.